The Russians, they arrived in Afghanistan in 1979 with approximately 1 million soldiers. As hadiyah, as a gift, the Afghans, they gave them back only 100,000 soldiers. And he says within 3-year period from 1983 to 1985, he says that they managed to kill over 80,000 soldiers, and the Afghans, they managed to injure over 40,000 soldiers. And what are we talking about? What are we talking about? I'll tell you another propaganda. So when America saw this, and this is all tied in together, part of this talk, my brothers, we need to understand as Muslims, the biggest fitna for us Muslims is having the right mindset and not being polluted with the fitna of propaganda of the Western media. So what America did was, within 2 years, they started assisting a few. Why? Because they wanted to get their revenge back on the Russians in Vietnam. And I'll talk about this inshallah tomorrow in detail. So what did they do? They started giving handouts to the Mujahideen, a few. And then they start spreading the rumors, and even Muslims started saying as well, the Afghanis, the Muslims are winning the war against communism, not because Allah is aiding them, it is because the help of the Americans. Mufti Rafi Usmani writes, a man would pick up a rock from the floor. He would make dua to Allah, oh Allah, turn this into a grenade. He would throw it at a tank and the tank would explode. He goes on further. Mufti Rafi Usmani says, there was a Maulana who passed away in 2018. Yesterday's freedom fighter, today is terrorist. He was Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani. Look at the name itself, Jalaluddin. It brings tremble inside the non-believers. Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani rahmatullah alayh, how great was he? You look at him, he wouldn't even hurt a fly. He had captured 450 Russian soldiers, and because these people had no medical aid, forget medical aid, they didn't even have weapons. They were fighting with slippers, they were fighting with stones. But their iman, yaqeen and trust in Allah was so strong that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had assisted these people. We hear people today as well say, okay, Muslims are going through problem. Why? Because this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. I ask you, there was no nation at that time more severe in regards to humiliation than the Afghans. But what did they do? They tied their trust with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as you have yaqeen and trust in Allah and you take the first step, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely assist you. Mufti Rafi Usmani says, Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani, he used to have an ammunition belt. I think I should say it a bit quietly in case they're listening. He used to have an ammunition belt. And Mufti Rafi Usmani says, I saw with my own eyes that ammunition belt had holes in it because the enemy had fired bullets at him. The bullets penetrated the ammunition belt, but it didn't go into the body of Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani. You know, when you watch Superman, Batman, fairy tales, then these stories, they seem unbelievable. But when you have iman and yaqeen Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will know that this definitely has happened. Mufti Rafi Usmani says, the same person, Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani. I'm just trying to give you a picture of these people. Who are these people? These people are connected to Khurasan, and these same individuals who from their progeny will arise an army which will be part of the army of Imam Mahdi. Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani, he says that we were in such a condition that we had no food, we were fighting the soldiers, and we woke up after Fajr Salah, we prayed Salah in Jamaat. After praying Salah, he says, I was the Amir, I was the Imam, I prayed the Fajr Salah and I started crying because the Mujahideen were saying, we need food, we are hungry, we haven't eaten for days. Imagine, people like me and you say, brother, I can't do anything, I'm stuck. And these guys who had every excuse to give in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're still giving their lives. Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani says, I made dua to Allah and I cried like a baby in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I was crying, the rest of us were making dua. He says, sleep overtook me. You know, the same sleep that overtakes us when we're watching movies. That same sleep. But the difference is, he had sakina and we have shaitan. So he says, I was sitting there making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of a sudden I fell asleep. And he says that somebody put his hand on my shoulder and said, Jalaluddin Haqqani, do you think that we have forsaken you when we have been helping you all this time in your battles? Do you think that we're going to stop helping you now today? Do you think we're going to stop helping you today? And Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani rahmatullah alayhi says that when I woke up from my sleep, He says, when I woke up from my sleep, I saw that in the dream the person said to me, go to that tree over there, not so far. He says, as all of us went to that tree, we found a goat which had been slaughtered. And in the dream the person said, eat from that, it is halal for you, Allah has given you the sustenance. So these people have iman, belief and yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can tell you so many stories. You know, people, Mufti Rafi Usmani says, he's a Sufi himself. And he was bait, he pledged allegiance to Dr. Abdul Hayy Arifi, who was the Khalifa of Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi Rahmatullah alayh. Him and his brother. Mufti Rafi Usmani says, a person who spends 1 second in the battlefield, then the years that he spends at the feet of his Shaykh doing his Islah, that Islah is done within a few seconds in the battlefield. Mufti Rafi Usmani, who went himself, he was 53 years old. He says, for the past 18 years I had back pain. As soon as I stepped foot into the battlefield with the other ulama, he says the back pain that I had, I totally forgot about it. Now let me explain to you to the radar system of these people. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. When your iman and yaqeen in Allah is strong, then nothing is impossible. Why? Because you are attached to Allah. The Mujahideen, upon many instances, they mention that whenever we would be targeted by the Russian planes, we had nothing whatsoever. We had broken rifles. Some of us had barely ammunition. And what would happen? The aeroplanes would arrive. They would bombard the trenches of the Muslims and they would fly off. But they say that subhanallah, on many occasions before the arrival of the planes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send birds half an hour before. And these birds would come and sit on the trenches of the Muslims and they would start flapping their wings. And we realized first it happened a few times and many of our soldiers, Mujahideen, were martyred. Then we realized this keeps on happening every time the aeroplane arrives. What was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing? Allah was sending these birds as a radar system to inform them, get ready, hide in the trenches, the aeroplanes are coming. Maulana Jalaluddin Haqqani Rahmatullah alayhi says that I was in a tunnel with the rest of our people and the bombardment started and it was so intense that the entire opening of the cave was covered by rocks. I got stuck and I realized that today my grave is going to be inside this mountain, nobody knows about me. He says, I started reciting the verse of the Quran. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. I kept on reciting this verse. Whoever fears Allah, whoever adopts taqwa in his life, Allah will definitely make an opening for that person. And he says, I was reciting this verse. A few minutes later, the same planes came. They bombarded the same location. However, none of our people got martyred. Rather, the rocks moved out their place and we came out nicely. We came out nicely. And just to let you know, these narrations are not fabricated. Just as you have the conditions of Imam Bukhari, which he laid down to write Bukhari, Mufti Rafi Usmani and the other ulama like Dr. Abdullah Azzam, Shaheed Rahmatullah alayh, he had strict conditions in explaining these stories. He says, until so many people did not narrate to me, or I did not go directly to that person and ask him about this situation, I did not write this down in the book. Let me mention one more thing and then I'll move on to the next point. Dr. Abdullah Azzam Rahmatullah alayhi, he says that there was one shaheed. His father wanted to find out if his son had been martyred and he has been accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does the father do? He says, I went to the body of my son who has just been martyred and I spoke to my son. It is our aqeedah that a person who dies in the battlefield, he is alive. Bal ahya walakin la tashurun. They are alive but you don't understand. You do not perceive it. You do not understand it. So he says, I went to the body of my son and I spoke to my son and I said, oh my son, if you are truly a shaheed and have been accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, show me a sign. The father says, my son lifted up his hand and he shook my hand. And he says, he shook my hand for 15 minutes and the grip was so intense that he felt like my fingers were going to break. This is what you call the land of Khurasan, and these are the people who have been accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.